Why did she say it that way? Not loud, not hesitant, just a quiet statement that carried more weight than anyone in the room understood. Ghost 9. The Navy SEAL had asked for her call sign almost as a joke, like a way to break the ice with the quiet analyst at the back of the room. She answered without a pause, without a smile, and then she'd vanished into the crowd before he could ask her what it meant. The name lingered, like smoke after a detonation. Most people in Naval Special Warfare Command didn't think twice about Roberts. She was the 26-year-old intelligence analyst who sat through endless briefings, compiled meticulous reports, and spoke in measured tones that never gave away too much. She was thorough, reliable, sharp. But she was also different. People noticed the way she moved, as if every step was a choice, as if her body remembered something her files didn't. They noticed her questions in briefings, too precise, too operational. The kind of questions you'd expect from someone who had spent nights in hostile territory, not behind a desk in Virginia Beach. And then there were her eyes, dark, analytical, impossible to read. They made seasoned operators shift in their chairs as if she could see through the layers of their experience, as if she'd been there too. What they didn't know was that had lived more in 7 years than most of them had in 20. She had walked through basements that smelled of blood and metal, crouched in fields where death brushed the air like static, spoken in voices that weren't her own. She had lived inside identities so deep that sometimes she forgot her real one. She had become a ghost. Ghost 9. And the price of being a ghost was silence. 18 months earlier, her controllers had pulled her out of the shadows and dropped her into the polished corridors of Naval Special Warfare Command. A sabbatical, they'd called it, time to decompress, to serve without serving, to use her skills from a safe distance. But she knew what it really was, a leash. Every morning she walked into the building with her badge, organized files, and sipped black coffee under fluorescent lights, while inside, part of her paced like a caged animal. Her colleagues thought she was quiet because she was shy. They didn't know that silence was survival, that invisibility was her shield. She thought she could manage it, blend into the rhythm of office life, pretend she wasn't someone else entirely, but then Montenegro appeared on the screen. Commander announced, his voice steady, professional. 6 months of surveillance. Arms transfer scheduled in less than 48 hours. If he succeeds, advanced weapons fall into the hands of Balkan terrorist cells. The room shifted, shoulders tightened, SEALs leaned forward. Pulse spiked. She knew his fortress, the way the sea battered the cliffs below it, the smell of diesel on his private dock, the paranoia in his eyes when he paced the halls. She had infiltrated that compound once before. She had mapped its secrets with her own eyes. And now they were planning to send 24 operators straight into it, blind. She tried to stay still, fingers tightening around her tablet. The walls of the conference room felt closer, the air heavier. No one else knew what they were walking into. No one else knew the tunnels beneath the fortress, the blind spots in the cameras, the gaps in the guard rotation. She did. She told herself to stay quiet, to remember her cover, to let the mission unfold without her. But then she heard it, casualties likely. Casualties. Spoken in the calm tone of tactical planning, but she knew what it meant. It meant coffins. It meant folded flags. It meant names whispered in rooms where families broke apart quietly. Something inside her cracked. What if there was another approach, she heard herself say. The room turned, every operator's eyes locked on her. Lieutenant Commander, leader of SEAL Team 7, gave her the kind of smile men give when they expect amusement, not answers. What did you have in mind, Roberts? For a moment she froze. Everything in her training told her to shut up, to disappear. But she saw their faces, tired, weathered, steady. They deserved more than blind sacrifice. The compound has vulnerabilities, she said carefully. Old foundations, escape routes, maintenance tunnels, if someone could access them from the inside. Silence. Skepticism. Her colleagues shifted in their chairs, polite but dismissive. The kind of silence that tells you they don't believe you, but they'll let you finish anyway. "Where did you get that information?" asked. Every nerve in her body burned. She wanted to tell the truth. "I've been there. I walked those tunnels. I mapped those doors," but the truth was poison. One drop and her cover would dissolve. "Research," she said, steady. "Historical records, satellite imagery, cross-referencing data." A half-truth, enough to keep the mask on. But wasn't convinced. His eyes narrowed, his brow furrowed. They had seen too many liars to mistake her for an honest one. Still, the thought lingered in the room. A single operator, a different vector, less risk. It was unorthodox, dangerous, but not impossible. When the briefing ended, pulled her into his office. Stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes sharp. They asked questions. Her answers came carefully measured, each word a step along a narrow ledge. One wrong move and she would fall. "Where does your knowledge come from, Roberts?" She hesitated. Her heart told her the truth. "From nights where I moved alone. From missions you'll never read about. From a life I can't admit to." Her voice said, "From research." The room grew colder. She could feel their doubt pressing in. Leaned forward. "You sound like someone who's seen it." The words landed like a bullet. She didn't flinch, she didn't blink, she couldn't. Instead, she let silence do the work. Sometimes silence was safer than lies. They let her leave, but she knew the questions weren't over. She could feel their eyes on her as she walked back down the corridor. Eyes that weren't just curious anymore. Eyes that were searching. Her hands trembled when she reached her desk. Not from fear, but from the weight of holding back. 7 years of secrets pressed against her. 7 years of lives taken, lives saved, identities worn like masks. And all she could do was sit in a chair, type on a keyboard, and pretend to be less than she was. She had promised herself she wouldn't go back, that she would let the missions belong to others, that she would choose silence over action. But as the hours passed, she replayed words, casualties likely. She saw the faces of men she had shared coffee with, laughed with, listened to. Men preparing to die because no one in the room had the courage to admit they needed more. She told herself she could live with silence. But silence wasn't living. Not for Ghost 9. And somewhere, buried beneath the weight of secrecy, she already knew what she would do. Because sometimes, the only way to save lives was to stop hiding. And that decision would cost her everything. What happens when silence no longer protects you? That was the question burning in his mind as she sat across from Commander's desk, the dim light reflecting off the rows of plaques and framed commendations behind him. Leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her like a man who had already decided she was hiding something. His stare was steady, the kind that didn't blink, didn't soften. She kept her face calm, her voice measured, but inside she was bracing herself for impact. Roberts began scrolling through her personnel file on his computer. "You've been here 18 months, excellent performance reviews, sharp analysis, unusual insights, but your background, it shows standard academic credentials, no field experience, no tactical assignments, nothing that explains how you knew the vulnerabilities of compound." The silence between them felt heavier than the desk separating them. Had rehearsed answers like this before. The cover story she lived under had been crafted by some of the best handlers in the business. But this was Europe. This wasn't shadow work where deniability was currency. This was Naval Special Warfare Command, and these men dealt in truth. "Sir," she said finally, her voice calm, "my academic research focused on terrorist organizational structures and their historical use of fortified facilities. I've studied how criminal groups repurpose old architecture. That's how I recognize the vulnerabilities." Shifted, That doesn't explain the details you gave. Tunnels, escape routes, maintenance systems. You didn't sound like someone reading reports. You sounded like someone who'd seen it. Her pulse kicked, but her expression didn't change. She'd been trained for this, to hold still when the world pressed in. I believe in thorough research, she answered softly. When I study a target, I don't stop at the surface. I analyze architectural records, satellite imagery patterns over time. Sometimes that reveals things standard intel doesn't. It was close enough to truth to sound believable, close enough to keep the mask in place. But wasn't satisfied. He closed her file and leaned forward, his hands clasped. Roberts, if your insights are accurate, they could change this mission's entire outcome. But we can't base an operation on speculation. If you have information that isn't in your file, if you have sources we don't know about, you need to be specific. The air in the office seemed to narrow. This was it, the moment she dreaded since arriving 18 months ago, the moment where her two lives collided. Her training told her to retreat, to stay invisible, to protect the cover that had kept her alive. But in her mind, she saw his team again, the operators joking in the cafeteria, the ones who shared stories late at night while they packed gear, the ones who trusted their commanders to send them into battles with a fighting chance. Could she let them walk into his fortress blind? Could she sit behind a desk and watch their names turn into folded flags? The words slipped out before she could stop them. There might be another option. Both men stilled, his gaze sharpened, pushed off the wall. What kind of option? Asked, his tone flat but dangerous. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to control every movement. I might be able to provide more detailed intelligence support, she said carefully. If I conduct additional research, access some networks not commonly used in standard channels, I could get structural layouts, guard rotations, electronic countermeasures, enough for precise mission planning. His eyes narrowed. What kind of networks? European contacts, she replied. Analysts, researchers. Some of them share information more freely than with official agencies. Another half-truth. They were contacts, yes, but not researchers, operatives, handlers, ghosts like her. Leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. And how quickly could you get this intelligence? Her mind calculated automatically. She still had the maps, the surveillance notes, the blueprints she'd drawn with her own hand inside's compound. She could have them ready in hours. Within 12, she said evenly, detailed enough to shift the plan. The two men exchanged a look. It was the kind of look operators shared when they didn't need words, one part suspicion, one part respect. Finally nodded. All right, but understand this, Roberts. If you provide intelligence for this mission, your security clearance will be reviewed, your sources scrutinized. There's no halfway. She felt the weight of that statement sink in. A review meant records, a review meant questions, and questions meant cracks. But she nodded anyway. I understand, sir. She stood to leave, her posture crisp, controlled. She reached the door when his voice stopped her. One thing, he said, based on your research, what's the minimum team size that could pull this off? She froze. This was dangerous, too dangerous. The real answer wasn't academic, it was lived. She turned slowly, her eyes steady. One operator with the right skills. The room fell silent. Raised a brow. One, against 20 guards in modern security. The right person, she corrected softly. Yes. For a long moment, no one moved, studied her with an intensity that made the air feel sharp. The expression didn't change, but his silence spoke louder than words. And then they let her go. Walked back to her workstation, her steps steady, her hands calm. But inside, her cover was cracking. She could feel it, the way his eyes lingered too long, the way his questions cut too close, the way silence no longer protected her. She told herself she could still maintain it. that she could send sanitized intelligence through contacts and keep the mask in place, that she could help without exposing herself. But she knew the truth. The only way this mission would succeed was if Ghost 9 went back into the field. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it brought a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She could hear her controllers' voices in her head, warnings about exposure, about cover, about survival. She remembered the message they'd sent once before: stay invisible, stay alive. But what did survival mean if she let good men walk into slaughter? The choice was already made. And as she sat down at her desk, opening secure files no one else knew existed, Roberts felt the ghost stirring inside her. Ghost 9. The name that never belonged in sunlight. The name that was about to come alive again. What does it feel like to live two lives in the same body? Sat at her workstation long after the office emptied, the glow of monitors flickering against her face. Officially, she was compiling reports for the Montenegro operation. Unofficially, she was unraveling a plan she wasn't supposed to touch. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but her mind wasn't on the data in front of her. It was on the faces of the men who would step into Fortress without knowing what waited for them. She'd seen the compound from the inside. She knew the traps built into its walls. To them, it was satellite imagery and intercepts. To her, it was memory. Her phone buzzed, a secure message, the kind that made your stomach tighten before you opened it. Maintain cover. Do not interfere. Operational security takes priority over tactical concerns. Her controllers, watching, waiting, reminding her who she was supposed to be. She deleted the message. No reply, no hesitation. For 7 years she'd obeyed without question. 7 years of running missions that left no trace, of wearing other people's names, of vanishing before dawn. She built her legend on silence. But now silence meant letting men die when she had the power to stop it. The choice clawed at her chest. Was she Pharaoh Roberts, the careful analyst, invisible behind her desk? Or was she Ghost 9, the shadow that had dismantled cells across Europe, the operative who knew Fortress like the back of her hand? The answer came in a whisper inside her own mind. You already know who you are. At 3:47 the call came. His voice crackled through the line, tense, sharp. Roberts, command center, now. She was already awake, already dressed. The room buzzed with controlled chaos when she arrived. Operators bent over maps, screens lit with satellite feeds, voices low, urgent. Stood at the display, jaw tight, turned toward her holding a report. Your European contacts came through, he said flatly, too well. Felt her pulse quicken. Guard rotations down to the minute, electronic countermeasure frequencies, structural blueprints including tunnels. This isn't academic research. This is operational reconnaissance. Someone been inside that compound. The schematic on his screen twisted her stomach. She recognized it instantly. It was her map, the one she'd drawn herself 18 months ago, digitized, enhanced, but hers. Her silence was dangerous now. Before she could answer, the comms board lit up. His voice cut through the noise. Sir, priority intercept moved up the timeline. Weapons transfer tonight. 8 hours. The room went still. 8 hours, no reinforcements, no time to bring in specialists, no second chances. His eyes swept the room. We can't insert additional assets. We don't have the personnel. We're back to square one. Slammed a hand on the table. We still don't have an operator capable of solo infiltration. All this intelligence is useless without someone who can use it. The word struck her like a bell. Someone who could use it. Her breath caught. Every instinct told her to stay silent, to protect the life she'd built. But another instinct, deeper, older, forged in shadows, told her to speak. There might be another option. The words hung in the air. His head turned slowly, eyes narrowed. What kind of option, Roberts? Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She felt the floor tilt beneath her, like stepping off a ledge with no parachute. What if, she said, her voice steady, you already have an operator qualified for this mission? Stare sharpened. What are you saying? She drew in a breath, steadying herself. Electronic warfare, close quarters proficiency, solo penetration experience. You're assuming no one here has those skills. Leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. Roberts, are you telling us you have operational experience not reflected in your file? The silence was unbearable. Every eye in the room burned into her. For 7 years she'd lived in shadows. For 18 months she'd hidden in plain sight. And now, with one sentence, she could burn it all down. Her throat tightened, but when she spoke, her voice carried a weight it hadn't before. I believe I could execute this mission, with minimal risk, maximum effectiveness. His expression shifted, shock, then disbelief, then something closer to recognition. Well, he muttered softly, I'll be damned. Didn't move. His gaze was steady, unblinking. Exactly who are you, Roberts? The words she wanted to say hovered on her tongue, her call sign, her legend, the name that wasn't supposed to exist in daylight. But not yet, not here, not like this. Maybe it's time you found out, she said instead. The meeting 20 minutes later felt like walking into a firing squad. Captain Stevens, Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, senior officers who'd built their careers on certainty now sat staring at her like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Stevens spoke first. Roberts, understand this conversation is recorded. Any false claims about operational qualifications are career-ending. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Your file shows no combat training, no special operations credentials, no field assignments. Yet you claim you can infiltrate one of the most secure compounds in the Balkans. Explain. Her palms itched, but she kept them still. My record reflects my intelligence assignment. There are aspects of my background not in official files due to classification. Martinez's eyes narrowed. Are you claiming you operated under deep cover? She let the silence answer for her. Not denial, not confirmation, just stillness. Cut in. Even if you had relevant experience, this target is one of the hardest I've ever seen. We're talking about 20 armed guards, layered defenses, redundant systems. It's suicide. One person against those odds, she said softly, is better than 24. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Stevens' jaw tightened. Roberts, you're an analyst. Your job is to provide information, not challenge tactical decisions. I'm not challenging, she said quickly. I'm offering an alternative, one that reduces casualties. The officers exchanged looks, tension sharp enough to cut. Finally, Stevens shook his head. This discussion is academic. You don't have the official qualifications. You're dismissed. Her chest burned as she snapped to attention. Yes, sir. She turned, hand on the door, whence voice stopped her again. For what it's worth, Roberts, he said quietly, I hope you're wrong about the risks. She didn't turn. Her voice was steady, but inside it was breaking. So do I, sir. She walked out, her steps crisp, her cover intact barely. But in her mind the decision had already been made. If no one else could do it, she would. Not as Roberts, not as an analyst, but as the ghost she'd promised never to be again. Ghost 9. What does it take to walk away from the only life you've ever known? Stared at the tactical displays long after the others had left the briefing room. Lines of red and blue traced over Montenegro's coast, symbols marking approach vectors, extraction points, risk assessments. To her, they weren't lines. They were death sentences. His plan was precise, professional, textbook. But textbook didn't matter when the fortress was designed to bleed operators dry. Every route they'd chosen led into overlapping fields of fire. Every assault vector put men in the open with no cover. Every minute of hesitation would tip's paranoia into full alert. Moderate to heavy casualties. That was the official phrasing. To her, it meant 12 men, maybe more, who wouldn't come back. She looked around the empty room, hearing echoes of their voices. Quiet concerns, calm calculations, steady tone hiding the weight of command. These weren't just names on a roster. They were people she drank coffee with, shared late-night conversations with, respected more than she dared admit. And they were walking into a trap. Her phone buzzed again, a second message from her controllers. Maintain cover. Do not compromise operational security. Orders final. Final. She deleted it without hesitation. Orders meant survival, but what was survival worth if you traded it for silence while others bled? At 19, when she'd been recruited, she thought survival meant obedience. 7 years later, she understood the truth. Survival without purpose was just another form of death. And tonight, purpose was calling. She walked back to her quarters, her footsteps steady, her heartbeat even. On the outside, she was Pharaoh Roberts, dutiful analyst, dismissed from the operation. Inside, she was already calculating timelines, vectors, insertion points. In her room, she locked the door and opened her storage locker. Behind the neatly folded uniforms and regulation gear was a second world she'd hidden for 18 months. Specialized electronics wrapped in cloth. Weapons she'd maintained in secret. Disguised communication equipment. Her hands moved with old precision, checking batteries, loading magazines, running diagnostics on tools designed for a life she wasn't supposed to live anymore. The analyst disappeared with every piece she packed. By the time the kit was complete, Ghost 9 stood in her place. She sat on the edge of her cot, laptop balanced on her knees. For years she'd maintained what she called her contingency archive, intelligence files far beyond her official remit. Not paranoia, preparation. Ghosts survived because they planned for what others thought impossible. The Montenegro files unfolded in front of her. Routes, schedules, vulnerabilities. She saw them with brutal clarity. The maintenance tunnel, still viable, concealed under vegetation, forgotten in upgrades, a throat into the heart of the fortress. The security grid, sophisticated but flawed. Layers of redundancies, yes, but human blind spots where arrogance assumed invulnerability. The warehouse, main location for the weapons transfer, central, exposed, yet reachable before the alarm cascaded. It could be done. If one person went in first. Her watch read 21:07. His team would be airborne in less than 3 hours. She had just enough time. The hardest part wasn't the plan. It was leaving, walking away from a cover she'd lived in for a year and a half, walking away from the safety of anonymity. She opened her secure phone, typed one last message to her controllers, operational necessity, authorization required. The reply came in seconds. Negative, stand down. Failure to comply will terminate assignment. She stared at the screen. Terminate assignment, not just orders revoked, not just reassignment. Terminate, she knew what that meant. She deleted the message, then powered down the phone and slid it into a drawer. Ghost 9 had stopped asking for permission. At 21:30, she slipped into the equipment storage facility. The night shift was distracted by briefings, preparations, coffee strong enough to mask fatigue. She moved quietly, collecting items one by one, climbing gear, communication sets, tools, each signed out through proper channels, each easily explained if anyone asked. Together, they formed a kit no analyst should need. From her personal stash, she added the rest, the things she could never explain away: modified electronics, suppressed weapons, identity papers that opened doors without questions. By 22:00, she was ready. The next challenge, leaving the base. She filed a routine request for extended archive research, perfectly normal, something she'd done before. It bought her cover until morning. By then, she'd either be back or she wouldn't. Her civilian clothes looked ordinary. Jeans, jacket, neutral colors, but beneath them was the weight of weapons and gear hidden in layers. The guard at the checkpoint barely glanced at her badge. Working late again, Roberts. She gave him the same half-smile she'd practiced for months. Washington's always asking for more. He waved her through. The gate clanged shut behind her. Her car slipped into the night, headlights cutting through the quiet streets of Virginia Beach. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The drive to Norfolk International took 47 minutes. She'd timed it before, memorized every turn, every stoplight, every alternate route. Escape planning had become instinct years ago. Her destination wasn't the main terminal. It was a private hangar where a G550 waited under dim floodlights, registered to a logistics company that didn't exist outside of paperwork. The pilot was a weathered man in his 50s, eyes tired but steady. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask her business. In this world, questions could kill. Flight time to Podgorica is 7 hours, with a stop in Germany, he said simply. Storm system in the Balkans might roughen the approach. Nodded. Storms were cover. She welcomed them. As the engines roared and the plane lifted off, she let herself breathe for the first time. Virginia disappeared beneath her. The Atlantic stretched ahead, black and endless. For 12 hours she would be no one, suspended between worlds. But when wheels touched down in Montenegro, Ghost 9 would step out. The flight was long, but her mind didn't rest. She studied maps on her encrypted tablet, reviewed guard schedules, adjusted for storm delays. Every minute shaved the margin thinner. By the time the plane descended into the mountain valleys outside Podgorica, dawn was breaking. Rain streaked the windows, the storm shrouding the airfield in mist. The landing strip was little more than a scar cut into the earth, lit by a handful of dim lamps. The plane touched down rough, bouncing once before settling. The pilot didn't look at her when she shouldered her gear. "Need me to wait?" "Negative," she said. "Return to Stuttgart, standard protocols." He nodded. No goodbyes, just engines spooling up as she stepped into the rain. The rental car was exactly where it should be. Nondescript, fuel tank full, keys where her advance contact promised they would be. She slid behind the wheel, the storm hammering the windshield, and drove into the mountains. The fortress loomed ahead hours later, rising from the cliffs like a scar carved into stone. Medieval foundations wrapped in modern defenses, a place that dared anyone to try. Most saw it as impenetrable. She saw it as a puzzle, one she had already solved. At 1:47 local time, she parked 3 kilometers out. Her gear felt heavy but familiar. Every strap, every weapon, every tool was muscle memory. She moved on foot through the wet grass, rain soaking her hood, the night alive with storm winds. She knew the patrol schedules, the blind spots in motion sensors, the cracks in paranoia. 30 minutes later, she crouched before a patch of overgrown vegetation hiding a rusted grate. The maintenance tunnel. Her entry point. She checked her watch. Steam was 13 minutes out, flying through the storm, expecting a fortress bristling with defenses. They didn't know. Not yet. But they would. Because tonight, Ghost 9 wasn't hiding. Tonight she was ahead of them. And once men reached walls, they would find the impossible already broken. What does it feel like to walk into the lion's den alone? Crouched before the grate, rain dripping from her hood, the storm rolling overhead like artillery. She slid the rusted metal aside with careful movements, every scrape muffled by the thunder. The tunnel yawned before her, a throat of blackness leading into the belly of fortress. She crawled through here once before, 18 months ago. Then it had been reconnaissance in and out, unseen, carrying memories instead of proof. Now it was war. She slid inside, her body pressed low, the weight of her gear scraping against stone. The air was damp, thick with mildew. Every breath tasted like rust. Her watch read 1:47. Team would hit their final approach in 13 minutes. By then, the compound security would already be bleeding from the inside. She moved slowly, every shift of her knees calculated to silence. Claustrophobic walls pressed close, each echo a threat. She remembered the pattern of this crawl, 30 meters straight, then a left turn into a narrower section where condensation dripped in steady rhythm. Her mind split as it always did in operations. One part hyper-focused on movement, the other calculating, guard rotations, sensor ranges, contingency exits, always 3 layers deep. That was how Ghosts survived. 15 minutes later, she reached the basement grate. It was new, reinforced. A heavy lock shining faintly in the dim light had upgraded since her last visit. Her tools came out small and precise. Picks moved like whispers. Every second stretched, her heartbeat syncing with the distant roll of thunder. One slip, one metallic snap, and the sound could carry upward through concrete like a flare. 37 seconds. The lock yielded with a soft click. She pushed the grate open and slipped into the basement. The air shifted instantly. Warmer, electric. The hum of power systems filled the corridor. Storage rooms stretched in either direction, doors locked but unguarded. She knew the layout left led to water systems, right to the power distribution center. She turned right. Her boots touched down like shadows. The corridor was longer than she remembered. New cameras had been installed. Their lenses swept back and forth in silent arcs. She watched them, counted the rhythm. 2 seconds left, 1 second right, 1 second pause. The blind spot wasn't wide, but it was there. She moved, 1 step, another, pressed flat to the wall, holding until the camera shifted away. Then another step. 47 seconds later, she was past. The reinforced door of the power center loomed. She studied it before, thick steel, electronic lock backup systems. Breaking it with force would be suicide. Breaking it with knowledge was different. She knelt, connected her diagnostic tool to the panel. Numbers flickered across her screen. Password protections, frequency filters, layers thought would keep him safe. She bypassed them one by one, not fast, not reckless. Each sequence unraveled like thread pulled from cloth. 4 minutes later, the door clicked open. Inside, the room pulsed with energy. Consoles glowed, switches humming. This was the compound's nervous system. Shut it down completely and alarms would trigger, but weaken it, bend it, that was art. She went to work. Electronic locks to accept override codes. Cameras looped through false feeds. Motion sensors recalibrated to ignore movement that matched her profile. Communications rerouted through a relay she controlled. She wasn't destroying the fortress. She was hollowing it from within. Her earpiece crackled, his voice calm but edged with strain. SEAL Team 7, 10 minutes out, storm slowing us down, approach vectors remain unchanged. She pressed her transmitter, her voice low, steady. Rescue leader, this is advanced reconnaissance. Be advised, primary vector compromised. Alternate route transmitting now. The silence that followed lasted too long. Identify yourself, demanded. We don't have forward assets on this mission. You do now, she said. Her fingers typed coordinates, uploading them through the hijacked network. Electronic defenses neutralized. Guard positions updated. Follow the new approach. Static hissed then again. His voice was different now, sharper, cautious. Unknown station, are you saying someone's already inside the compound? She pulled her hood back, wiped rain from her face and checked her watch. 1:59. Time was burning. I'm saying your mission just became achievable. Follow the coordinates. Radio silence until perimeter breach. She cut the channel. No arguments, no explanations, just silence. She grabbed her gear and moved deeper. The next target was the comms hub, 2 floors up. If she could control it, she'd see what guards saw, And more importantly, she'd feed men exactly what they needed to survive. The climb through stairwells was more dangerous. Twice she froze, listening to footsteps echo above her. Guards moving in irregular patterns, paranoia turned into discipline. She slipped through service corridors, her body pressed close to walls, her breathing measured. Every step carried the weight of memory, the smell of sweat and smoke, the echo of her past life in shadows. At the comms hub, 2 guards stood posted, heavier weapons, alert stances. She crouched in the darkness, watching. Her suppressed pistol was steady in her hand. 2 shots, clean, no noise louder than the storm above. But her hand didn't move yet. She watched their rhythm, one leaning, one packing. Packing man paused every 20 seconds. Leaning man adjusted his grip every 15. Patterns, always patterns. She exhaled. 2 shots, 2 bodies lowered silently to the floor. She dragged them aside, slid inside the hub. The room was alive with screens, camera feeds, radio chatter, guard positions updated in real time, paranoia mapped in pixels. She tapped into the network, fingers flying. One by one, cameras went dark on approach vector. Patrols were rerouted, their orders subtly altered through transmissions. The fortress still looked secure on systems, but in reality, gaps were opening. Her earpiece crackled again. His voice tight, approaching perimeter, visibility low, storm cover holding. "Maintain course," she replied softly. "Guards diverted, cameras blind, you're clear." Silence again, this one shorter, then "copy." She leaned back in the chair for just a moment, her chest rising and falling. She could hear guards shouting faintly in other corridors. They knew something was wrong, though not what. The ghost was inside their walls, and the fortress didn't know how to fight something it couldn't see. She moved again, quick and silent, toward the next objective, the warehouse, the heart of the mission, the place where weapons waited. Every step forward pressed the weight of choice harder against her ribs. She had her controllers. She had burned her cover. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And yet beneath the weight, something else stirred. Purpose. For 7 years, she'd been invisible. Tonight, she wasn't hiding. Tonight, she wasn't a file in a database or a name no one said aloud. Tonight, she was exactly who she was meant to be. Ghost 9. And's team, men who had no idea who was watching over them, would live because she refused to stay silent. The storm howled outside, lightning flashing through narrow windows. The compound's guards scrambled like ants sensing an unseen hand. And Roberts moved deeper, silent, precise, unstoppable. Because when ghosts returned to the battlefield, they didn't come to haunt. They came to change the ending. What happens when your past finally catches up with you? Moved through the fortress like water through cracks, silent and unrelenting. Every corridor was a memory, every stairwell a reminder of nights when she wore a different face. But this time, she wasn't here to vanish. She was here to open the door for men who didn't even know she existed. Her watch read 2:21. His team was minutes from the breach. The storm still raged outside, thunder shaking the stone walls. Perfect cover, but not perfect enough. The warehouse was 3 levels up, guarded by overlapping security layers. Wasn't careless, his empire depended on paranoia. But paranoia had blind spots. She mapped them long ago. The first checkpoint was a steel door at the end of a narrow corridor. 2 guards, weapons slung but alert. They paced in opposite rhythms, never leaving the door unprotected. She crouched in the shadows, breath controlled, pistol steady in her hand. Her finger tightened. 2 shots, 2 bodies, but she hesitated. Killing was easy, too easy. And part of her wondered how many more lives she would have to take before this night was over. She lowered the pistol, reached into her pack, a small noise emitter calibrated to mimic distant footsteps. She placed it near the opposite corner and activated it. Seconds later, 1 guard stiffened. "You hear that?" The other frowned, scanning the shadows. Both moved away from the door, rifles raised, steps cautious. Slipped forward like a shadow, bypassed them in silence, and overrode the lock in less than 15 seconds. By the time the guards returned, the door was already shut behind her. Inside, the stairwell stretched upward, narrow and steep. The smell of oil and damp stone thickened the air. She climbed, her movements deliberate, ears straining for every creak, every echo. At the second level she froze, voices above, guards shifting, a faint metallic click, someone chambering around. She backed against the wall, closed her eyes and listened. 2 men, their rhythm predictable. One leaned on the railing. The other walked the length of the landing every 30 seconds. When the packing guard turned his back, she moved. Up the steps, body low, pistol angled. A swift strike to the neck. He collapsed silently into her arms. She eased him down, breath tight, then pressed against the wall as the second guard leaned again. A heartbeat later, she was behind him. Arm hooked, chokehold tight. He struggled briefly, then went limp. 2 men down, still silent. She dragged their bodies into the corner, then pushed upward again. Her earpiece crackled. Voice clipped. Perimeter breached. Storm cover holding. We're inside. She allowed herself one breath of relief, then spoke, her tone calm, even. Path is open. West stairwell compromised. Use north vector, clear until the courtyard. Static, then again low. Who the hell are you? She didn't answer. Not yet. The third level was the final obstacle. Beyond it lay the warehouse, the center of empire, the transfer point for weapons that could destabilize half a continent. But it was also where her past collided with her present. As she reached the final landing, she froze. Voices, not guards, himself. She recognized his tone instantly, even muffled by the thick door. Harsh, commanding, edged with paranoia. She hadn't seen him in 18 months, but the sound of him was burned into her memory. And then she heard something that made her stomach twist. American Special Forces, they are coming. Her blood ran cold. How did he know? She pressed closer, ear against the door. His voice rose again. We will show them the fortress cannot be touched. The transfer leaves in 2 hours. Kill whoever comes. Boots shuffled, orders carried, the scrape of crates being moved. Her mind raced. Team thought they had surprised, they didn't, was waiting for them. Her fingers tightened around her transmitter. She could warn him, tell him to abort. But that would mean admitting who she was, breaking cover completely, shattering the fragile wall she'd built. Her breath caught, choices pressed like knives. Then she heard another voice, faint, trembling. A prisoner. Her chest tightened. She hadn't known was holding anyone. The voice was hoarse, barely audible. A man pleading, his words cut off by the strike of a rifle butt. Shut her eyes. For 7 years she'd carried ghosts of people she couldn't save, faces that haunted her in the dark. Was she about to add another? No, not tonight. She pulled a flash device from her pack, set the timer for 90 seconds, and slipped it under the door crack. It rolled silently into the warehouse. She retreated to the shadows, crouched low, pistol ready. 90 seconds felt like a lifetime. At 72's voice barked again. At 84, footsteps thundered closer. At 90, light exploded. Shouts, confusion, chaos. Moved, through the door into the smoke, pistol up. The warehouse erupted in noise. Guards stumbled, blinded, weapons firing wild. Crates toppled, spilling their contents, rifles, explosives, chaos waiting to spread. She slid behind cover, her shots precise. One guard down, another disabled. She wasn't killing unless she had to, but the line was thin. In the chaos, she spotted him. The prisoner. A man bound to a chair near the far wall, blood streaked across his face. She cut across the floor, every step calculated, bullets sparking against metal around her. She reached him, knife flashing, ropes falling. Move, she whispered, dragging him up. His eyes widened as he looked at her. Confusion, relief, fear. He didn't ask who she was, maybe he knew better. They slipped toward the back wall, a service door, unlocked thanks to her earlier tampering. They stumbled into the corridor beyond. The prisoner gasped, his breath ragged. "Who are you?" Her answer was automatic, "No one." But in her chest, she felt the truth she couldn't say yet. Ghost 9. Her earpiece crackled again, his voice sharp, strained. "Courtyard clear, entering interior, where's our contact?" She pressed her transmitter, breath steady despite the chaos. "2 levels above you, warehouse compromised, adjust vector northeast, avoid main entry, hostiles alerted." A pause, then again, "Copy." His tone was different now, trust layered under suspicion. She guided the prisoner down a side corridor, every turn etched in her memory. The fortress was alive with shouts now, guards scrambling, alarms bleeding through the storm. But their search was scattered, their coordination broken. She had tilted the balance. For Steam, the fight had just begun. For her, it was only half over. Because wasn't just a target. He was a man who remembered her face. And if he saw her tonight, the name Ghost 9 wouldn't stay buried. What happens when the mask finally breaks? Moved through the labyrinthine corridors with the prisoner leaning heavily against her, his weight slowing her pace. His breath rattled, broken by quiet groans he tried to choke back. She wanted to tell him to stay silent, but the human part of her, the part that hadn't been Ghost 9 for so long, couldn't silence pain. The fortress was awake now. Shouts echoed through the stone, orders ricocheting like gunfire. His voice carried above the chaos, harsh and sharp, commanding his men to sweep every corridor. Her watch read 2:46. His team would be converging toward the interior by now, their path cut open by the chaos she'd ignited. But chaos was fragile. It turned on you the moment you mistimed a step. She stopped at a junction, listening. Boots thundered nearby, too close. "Stay here," she whispered, easing the prisoner against the wall. His eyes were wide, terrified, but he nodded. She drew her suppressed pistol and slipped into the shadows. 2 guards rounded the corner, rifles up. Their eyes darted through the dim corridor, tension in every movement. She let them pass, their backs exposed for just a heartbeat. 2 shots, 2 bodies, silent collapses. She dragged them into a side alcove, covered them with debris, then returned to the prisoner. His gaze lingered on her weapon, her movements, her silence. "You're not one of them," he muttered, voice hoarse. "No," she said quietly, "and neither are you. Move." They pressed on. Her earpiece crackled, again. "Contact heavy, 3rd floor stairwell blocked, we're pinned." Space quickened. She knew the stairwell he meant. Narrow, exposed, easy to defend. She spoke into her mic, her voice calm, precise. "Hold position, suppressing in 10 seconds." She sprinted ahead, leaving the prisoner crouched behind cover. Her boots barely touched the ground as she moved through corridors she knew like scars. The stairwell loomed, guards dug in at the top, firing down into the storm of seal gunfire below. She didn't hesitate. From the shadows of the side corridor, she fired 3 shots. Each found its mark. Guards collapsed, their rifles clattering down the steps. The seals surged upward. His voice cut through the channel. "Whoever the hell you are, good timing." She didn't answer, just moved back to collect the prisoner, her movements fluid, controlled. Ghost 9 wasn't built for thanks. Minutes later, she joined a converging hallway and froze. Stood at the far end. His rifle raised, his team fan behind him. His eyes locked on her immediately, sharp and unrelenting. For a moment no one moved. The storm outside thundered. Inside, silence stretched. Then lowered his rifle slightly, confusion etched across his face. "Roberts." The name cut like glass. She kept her pistol low, the prisoner leaning against her. Her voice didn't waver. "Keep moving. Knows you're here. Warehouse compromised. East vector still viable." Stepped closer, disbelief hardening into something sharper. "It was you. all along. She didn't answer, couldn't, not yet. One of the SEALs muttered, "What the hell, she's intel." "Not tonight," said, his eyes never leaving hers. The prisoner groaned, breaking the moment, pushed him forward. "He needs secure him." Gestured, two operators moving to take the man's weight, but his stare stayed on her. "You've got explaining to do." "Later," she said, already turning away. "We're not done." Gunfire erupted again, closer now, harder. Men regrouping, the fortress tightening around them. Led the way through side corridors, her every step guided by memory. She moved like she belonged here, because she did. They cut through resistance with precision, her pistol snapping in rhythm with the SEALs' rifles. She was faster, quieter, more surgical. Every kill weighed on her, but there was no hesitation. Not tonight. At 3:12 they reached the central chamber, the warehouse again, but this time from the opposite side. Crates stacked high, shadows alive with movement. Himself stood near the far wall, shouting orders, a pistol in his hand. His breath caught. For 18 months she'd buried his face in her mind. But now here he was, the man who'd haunted her last mission, whose paranoia nearly killed her. His eyes swept the room, then locked on her. Recognition flashed, rage followed. "You," he snarled, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The ghost." Her blood ran cold. In that instant everything shattered. Her cover, her silence, her carefully built. He had named her, out loud, in front of Ghost 9. Gunfire erupted, drowning the moment. SEALs surged forward, suppressing men, dropped behind cover, heart pounding. His voice cut through the chaos, close to her ear now. "Ghost 9, that's who you are." She didn't look at him. Her pistol barked again, another guard falling. "Later," she hissed. But's tone was sharp, edged with something between anger and awe. "You were never an analyst. You've been lying to us since day one." A bullet sparked against metal near her head. She ducked lower, teeth clenched. "You want to talk about lies? Do it after we survive this." They fought shoulder to shoulder. The SEALs moved with military precision, clearing angles, stacking on doors. Moved differently, faster, more fluid, cutting ahead into places no one dared. Together they pushed men back. But himself slipped away, retreating through a side door with two bodyguards. Saw him move, and instinct took over. She broke from cover, sprinting after him. Shouted her name. The SEALs called warnings, but she didn't stop. The chase was personal now. She crashed through the door into a narrow corridor. Men turned, rifles raised. She dove, rolled, fired, 2 shots, 2 kills. She came up running. Stumbled ahead, his rage spilling into fear. "You shouldn't be alive," he shouted over his shoulder. Her voice was calm, steady, lethal. "Neither should you." The corridor ended in a steel door leading to the outer courtyard. He shoved it open, rain lashing in. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his face twisted with hate. He turned, pistol raised. She fired. His shot missed, hers didn't. Fell against the stone, his pistol clattering to the ground. His bodyguards were already gone. She approached slowly, pistol steady. He coughed, blood streaking his lips. His eyes burned even as his strength bled away. "You think you win," he rasped, "but ghosts always die alone." She held his gaze, silent. And then she pulled the trigger. The storm swallowed the sound. When and his men burst through moments later, they found her standing over the body, rain plastering her hair to her face. Her pistol lowered, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then stepped forward, his voice was quieter now. "Ghost 9. She finally looked at him. Her eyes carried 7 years of secrets. "Now you know." He studied her, the weight of realization settling in. Then he nodded once. Not approval, not condemnation, just acknowledgement. "Extraction point?" he asked. She exhaled, the moment breaking. "East Ridge, 3 clicks, let's move." Together, they turned into the storm. The fortress behind them burned with the chaos they'd unleashed. But for the real fire was inside. Because once a ghost stepped into the light, there was no going back. What does it cost to be seen for who you really are? The rain came harder as In's team pushed east, the storm clinging to them like a cloak. The fortress behind them burned with gunfire and shouts, its empire collapsing in the chaos they'd left behind. But didn't look back, ghosts didn't. The prisoner staggered between two seals, every step heavy but alive. That alone was worth something. One man saved, one future preserved, but inside her chest the weight didn't lighten. She could feel's eyes on her as they moved, watching her with questions he couldn't ask in the middle of a fight, questions she wasn't sure she could answer even if she wanted to. The extraction ridge loomed ahead, sharp rock against the storm-lit sky. A helicopter was already inbound, its rotors a distant hum. Relief for the team, for her. She wasn't sure. They reached the ridge line at 3:57. The wind whipped around them, the storm beating against their gear. The SEALs formed a perimeter, rifles ready, eyes sharp. Moved closer, his voice low. "You going to explain?" Adjusted her gear, the storm soaking through her jacket. "Not here." "You think you can just vanish after this?" His tone wasn't angry. Not exactly, but it carried something heavier, betrayal maybe, or disbelief. She met his eyes, calm, steady. "That's what ghosts do." He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. "I should be furious, but right now I'm alive because of you. My men are alive because of you." Her chest tightened. She wanted to look away but didn't, and that has to be enough. The helicopter roared closer, spotlight cutting through rain. The prisoner was loaded first, slumped between medics. Then the SEALs climbed aboard one by one, their eyes darting between and. She was the last to approach, but when she stepped toward the bird, blocked her path. "Command going to want answers," he said. "Your cover's gone, they'll bury you for this." Her voice was quiet but certain. "They'll try, but I've been buried before." Lightning split the sky, illuminating her face, calm, resolute, unreadable. Searched her eyes, then finally stepped aside. "You walk away from me after this, I'll find you." Her lips almost curved into a smile, almost. Maybe that's the point. She climbed into the helicopter, the roar swallowing everything else. The flight back to base was long, heavy with silence. The SEALs said nothing, though their eyes said everything. Confusion, gratitude, distrust, wonder. Sat across from her, his gaze steady. He didn't ask more questions, not yet, but the silence between them was louder than words. At 5:12 they touched down at a NATO forward base. The prisoner was rushed to medical. The SEALs were debriefed immediately. Stepped onto the tarmac, rain mixing with sweat, exhaustion pressing on her bones. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't invisible. And that terrified her more than any mission ever had. Inside the command tent was waiting. His expression was carved from stone. Behind him, officers whispered, eyes flicking to her like she was a weapon they didn't know how to handle. "Roberts," said, his voice cold, "or should I say Ghost 9? The words rippled through the room. Some faces showed shock, others recognition, didn't flinch. Stood at attention, her posture unshaken. "Sir, you lied to your command, you operational history, you compromised your cover and direct orders from higher authority." Words struck like blows. "Do you deny any of it?" She didn't blink. "No, sir." "Then why?" The room went silent, every eye on her, every second stretched. She exhaled, her voice even but heavy with weight. "Because casualties were likely. Because information I had could save lives. Because silence wasn't survival anymore, it was betrayal." No one spoke. His jaw tightened. "You think that justifies going rogue?" Her eyes didn't waver. "I don't justify, I act. And tonight, 24 men are alive because I did." The words hung like smoke. Broke the silence. His voice was low, steady. "She's right. Without her, half my team wouldn't be standing here. You can bury her file, sir, but you can't bury that. The officers shifted. Eyes flicked from back to. The storm outside pounded against the canvas as if echoing the weight of the moment. Finally spoke again. You understand what happens now. Officially, you don't exist. Unofficially, you're a liability. There's no protocol for this. Her chest rose and fell once. There never was. He studied her, then nodded slowly. Get out of my sight before I change my mind. She saluted, not crisp, not perfect, but enough. Then she turned and walked into the storm. No one stopped her. No one called her name. By the time the sun began to bleed through the clouds, she was gone. Stood at the edge of the tent, watching her silhouette fade into the rain. His men whispered behind him, questions left unanswered, but he didn't speak. Because he understood something they didn't. Some people weren't meant to be explained. Some people weren't meant to stay. They were meant to appear when the world was darkest, to act without recognition, to save without acknowledgement. Ghosts. And as disappeared into the dawn, one truth remained. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.